Hi, welcome to Studio Stillwater. I'm Michelle Charles.
And my name is Chris Peters.
And today we are here with Joanne Murer with the Stillwater League of Women Voters and Bryan Langford-Loftis, who is with the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee. Thank you guys for being here today.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
The election's finally over, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, so we do have some results.
Yes, we do. We do have results. And Christy Hawkins is going to take the seat on the city council.
Yes.
And then we have Marshall Baker and Camille DeYoung, who are going to be coming back to the Stillwater Board of Education. Marshall Baker had served on the school board for about a year and a half, had moved away, and now he's moved back and is back on the board. And then Camille is continuing. She has been the president of the board for the last year.
Okay.
And then both Christy Hawkins and Ariel Ross, who were lovely and who we really enjoyed interviewing and getting to know,
Yes.
were newcomers. Ariel had actually served on various city committees and had applied for a vacancy on the city council, but she had not run for office before, had not launched a campaign.
Oh, okay.
So this was the first campaign actually for Ariel, Christy, and for Camille, actually.
And Carly.
And
Carly.
and
the ones that didn't make the runoffs and
sure,
stuff.
absolutely.
Lots of new.
But out of the people who were actually elected and will be taking office, at least two of them, this was their first campaign.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we're excited. It's. And I'm just kind of relieved that the whole election process is over for a little while. I'm ready for a little bit of a break.
Yes.
But I think it's important to do, kind of talk about it. Like, what was the process like? We had a lot of interest this year, which is great. There were a lot of forums and things like that, but we don't always have this much interest, do we?
No. It's really picked up.
You never really think that you're going to say, oh, we can rest now after a city election, I don't think.
Yes.
It was exciting. But we did a lot of things differently this year, which is a little bit uncharacteristic, I think, for the way things have been going. I've only been back in town for basically one good election cycle to see kind of how things were done. But from what I understood, this was all pretty novel for Stillwater.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to have seven candidates.
Thanks.
To have 7 candidates for a city council seat, that's crazy. Yes. I mean, I think 4 is the most I've seen previously.
Yeah.
So what do we think, what caused this? So we had more people actually apply and run, but then this is kind of why we've called this little round table here together of there was also more of us stepping up as citizens to engage with the candidates and make them work a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't always had that, have we? A lot of times we have people where there's either, maybe they don't draw an opponent and they just take office, or maybe the campaign just doesn't really go on that long. And in this case, everybody had to really get out there and talk. And I think you would agree with this, Joanne, that the value of having these contested races is that it forces you to have the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a league stance, right?
Yeah, that is. We want them to verbalize why they're, like the questions that we ask some for the paper, and then we have some that people send in this time was before the elections. They sent them in. And the library was good about helping us set up there for the runoff. And they get a conversation going, and we ask questions like, for the paper, we want to know their motivation for running, the current issues, like if there's a bond issue coming up, we want to know what they would do with the money or taxes, or why they're running. And what challenges do they expect to meet and encounter.
Joanne, how long has the League of Women Voters been doing that here in Stillwater? Do you know?
Many, many years. I don't know exactly. I've been forum chair for 2 years now. this is my second year, and I agreed to do it another year too.
Yay.
Oh,
So,
good.
well, thank you. And so, but we've been doing forums for, well, I joined the league in 1990. So, and I think it's been ever since then, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And your forums that are hosted by the league, I mean, they're kind of one of the bigger things that the candidates have looked to. I mean, the Chamber's done forums in recent years, and the Rotary always does one for its membership.
Mm-hmm.
But the League of Women Voters Forum is always televised on, local government access. It's been kind of one of the ones where I think maybe the general public was more aware and had more opportunity to engage.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's been a really important service, but I mean, this last year with COVID, it's kind of disrupted a lot of those normal ways we do things. How'd you guys adapt?
We adapted fine. Just finding a venue took a while, but we adapted just fine as far as that goes. In fact, I was contacted by the Pawnee Nation, and they have 9 candidates running for planning election commission, and I'm not sure what that person does, but I'm going to be moderator. It's going to be virtual, and they're supposed to be notifying the news press, so it'll be in the news press and the Perkins Journal.
Heads up, Michelle.
That's cool.
Yeah. Have you received anything yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, I'll talk.
I'm excited though.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Yeah, and we need somebody. Somebody there is going to time.
Okay.
It's going to time because I'm going to do it from my home.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to travel to Pawnee.
No, that's that is awesome.
And
we're just zooming.
And the guy said some of the candidates, a lot of them live 3 hours away, and they'll love having virtual.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
sure.
it really makes, it's really helpful in a way. It's nice to be person, but when you have 9 candidates, like we had 7 and 5, I mean, it really helps.
Well, and when you're talking about Indian country, I mean, you're talking tribal members who are, the tribal government is located in a certain area.
Yes.
But in Oklahoma, of course, we don't have the reservation system where people necessarily live right around where the tribal government is. People can be kind of spread out. And then later on, they're committing when they run to coming back once a month or whatever the interval is for those meetings, but they don't necessarily have to live right there. And they can still be a member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
that's the Zoom is going to be a big advantage for them.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that maybe this year also increased the engagement was the ability, not just from the candidates, but also from like city council and school board and all that for parents and stuff and citizens to not have to physically go there and be able to still, voice their opinion.
And see them online.
I think that's one
their
of the
phone or their computer.
I think that's one of the things that's going to stick. Actually,
I hope
from
so.
the pandemic.
Yes.
There's actually legislation going through right now that requires public bodies to record and stream their meetings for the public, which is huge.
Zoom just
is.
needs to add a timer function.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
That the speaker can see and know that it's coming down. So when they're just, on their phone or whatever, they know. I've spoken a handful of times in person and online.
Right.
And in person, you've got the little countdown clock and you're like, oh my gosh, it's flashing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
Yes.
but I've still got 5
Right.
seconds left to speak. And they let you go over. I mean,
Yes.
it's not hardcore, but
Sure.
but on the virtual ones I've seen where it's like, okay, somebody's got to butt in. Somebody's just got to be like,
yes.
all right, time's up.
Well, and every elected body or, a group of people has a different standard for that. The city council used to not have a limit on how long you could talk until a group of people started talking for a really long time. And that's why we have a time limit now. I remember when that was enacted because there were some meetings that, lasted till like 10 o'clock
Can you
at night.
filibuster at a city council
Some people sure tried.
They try. They try. Oh, I thought of something that the League of Women Voters, you asked how long we've been doing this? Well, the League of Women Voters, I don't know about Stillwater, but we held the first presidential debate. The League of Women Voters did.
Oh, that's cool.
Of the United States. There's League
Oh,
of Women
wow.
Voters Oklahoma,
Wow.
League of Women Voters U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we held the first debate.
Because the
for
League of Women
presidential-
Voters was born out of the suffrage movement, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was born out of such. Yeah.
Very cool. And y'all just celebrated the, what is it, the 100th anniversary?
100th
year
anniversary,
Yes.
yes, of the League, which is cool.
That is
Super
very
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and people I think they should understand that even though it says League of Women Voters,
Oh,
that
men can join.
and the focus is voter education, which is really how the
Yes.
league started,
Yes.
right? The idea that
Get the vote out.
right.
Get people registered and get the vote out.
And you had women who were new voters who needed to be informed about
Yes.
what they were voting on.
Yes. And we're nonpartisan. You know, we don't support any one candidate. We do privately, but we cannot support one candidate, you know, by ourselves when we vote. But as far as, and we can't, if you're on the board, if I'm right about this, I don't think we can run for an office if we're on the board of League of Voters.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah.
So, Bryan, what about the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee? I mean, you guys have been, pretty active over the years, but what is your focus and how do you get involved in these elections?
So that's a good question, Michelle, because when I actually moved back to Stillwater in 2018, and I was kind of getting myself off the ground in my actual business, in the insurance business at Loftis and Wetzel, and I thought, I need to join the chamber because, I'm in sales and this is what we do. We need to be involved in order to be visible and actually engage in the community. And I went, okay, I'll get on the chamber website and see kind of what are some ways I can get involved in. And I found that there's committees that one can join, and government affairs is one of them. Well, I had a remote interest in that. I kind of drew political cartoons and things like this, and deeply followed the news while I was abroad because I was in South Korea. So when the evening news was on, it was my morning commute, and so I would get kind of the day, the dust settling in the day prior, and while I was on my way to school, I was a middle school teacher at a 111-year-old institution over there. And so anyway, I joined up with that, and John Bartley was the chair of that committee, but he doesn't have a lot of free time, as you might imagine. And so there came a time about February in 2019 when the group met on the regular Tuesdays at 4:00, first Tuesday, and they said, we need to kind of elect a different chairperson who can organize these, and so we can be more timely and things like this. And we looked around the table, and I said, I would not be opposed to doing this. And they said, okay, great, you're the chair of the Government Affairs Committee
That's
now.
how that works.
I was going to say that's a kiss of death right there.
Yes.
Well, and the brutal irony is I didn't honestly know how city government worked. And I didn't know, well, really how a lot of the government functions worked at Stillwater. So I was thankful for the institutional knowledge that was on the committee that I could rely on. And so at the very beginning, I was kind of a glorified scheduler, right? I made sure that we met and we had something to talk about, and I could rely on, for instance, Stephen Gose or Roger Gose to talk infrastructure into the ground or something, and we could do something. But the group, as I got my feet on the ground, we kind of took on the idea of, we have these forums, at least when I joined, we were putting these forums on regularly, that making them open to the public was important and allowing the public to submit questions, but also being able to ask questions pertinent to the chamber. So we have a state legislative agenda that was regularly published, and so one of our tasks is to kind of keep that current as one of our kind of pillars of that committee's work. And then as we kind of went along, well, a legislative session ends in June. So I thought, well, what are we going to do for the rest of the time? There's plenty of other government bodies at work. So we
Yes, there are.
decided that, well, why not have a local agenda? And so we kind of got to work on what are some things that we kind of monitor locally, or what are some things that need to happen in Stillwater to make business possible, or more friendly, or what can attract somebody to come to Stillwater and do something, and to lift the whole community up. So it wasn't just business per se, but for the betterment of Stillwater. And I think that's kind of a mission that I embrace as the chair of the group, not just business, but the town at large.
Well, something too that occurs to me as you're saying that, and the lesson that we've hammered over and over again as we've talked to all the different candidates, is that over the last year, we've all learned exactly how much local elected officials impact our daily lives.
Yes.
Yes.
And so it makes sense to me when you're talking about the Chamber of Commerce, has had, say, a state agenda. So you're looking at the Oklahoma Department of Commerce and what types of incentives they offer
Right.
and things like that. Those are tools that the chamber has in its toolbox to, help existing businesses, and in its role contracting with the city of Stillwater
Right.
for economic development. So those are definitely things. But then you look at what's going on locally, right? And our city council determines whether or not a new tax increment financing district is going to be developed, what types of local incentives there are. The permitting process, which is a huge deal when you're talking about opening a business or building a new facility. I mean, all of these things, actually, I would say, have a much bigger impact on how easy it is and how likely it is for a smaller business anyway to come to Stillwater.
Right.
So, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me for the chamber to turn its eyes
Yes.
to those local officials and those local matters.
Right,
Yes.
because these are the things that we can see happen, and
Yeah.
it's not partisan whether the road gets a pothole fixed or not, or
That
or
is
whether
true.
permitting is easy or cumbersome, and that's. You don't have to know how cumbersome it is to know that it is, because when you talk to somebody in the business community, that's often the first thing they mention.
Yes. Yes.
So I've learned a lot about that, just getting involved in this sudden leadership position. But
So as you moved your eyes to local stuff, how did that develop then?
what do you mean?
Well, I mean, as you started saying, okay, we need to have a local agenda, you
Right.
know, and we need to be looking at these local matters.
Right. So kind of the way we approached that was, our state agenda has kind of broad categories like, economic development and health and human services kind of things. And so we go, what are some kind of broad strokes categories that we would focus on locally? And of course, infrastructure is one of the first things, and government service was another one, and kind of quality of life. And
Which
so,
is pretty squishy, right? I
Right.
mean, that means so many different things to so many different people.
it was, as we heard during the election.
Right.
And so we kind of purposefully kept it a little bit broad like that, so that we could, as things arose, we kind of approached this is the more organic of the two documents, because, the government will actually, contrary to popular belief, actually move fast on some of things that might be important in the moment. And so if we want something on there, we need to be able to update it kind of live. At least that's the idea. In practice, it is a little bit difficult to do that, because it does need to be approved by the chamber board on a regular basis to be a value statement or a policy goal of the chamber. But yeah, we had these kind of broad categories, and we kind of focused in on what's important locally, and we kept it kind of abstract so that we could think of things and then eventually kind of amend it over time into something more precise.
So, Bryan, tell me how. So, we've got that local agenda. Before you, the chamber forums had existed. I don't know how long when they officially started doing that. But how did you come about like combining, hey, let's get the news press and the League of Women Voters this time, like kind of all to work together on these forums? Because I think that's also what was very new and very encouraging, just to see these institutions come together.
If I remember right, Michelle, it actually kind of emerged from a text conversation you were having with Justin back in December, I think it was.
Probably. I think I remember that.
Yeah. And, one of the things in the plotting of the original forums was that, we didn't want to interrupt the time of other community groups out there also vying for the candidates' time or the officials' time.
Sure.
So this year, with kind of the emergence of the new Zoom culture, where actually more people could tune in and more people were interested because there were the hot button issues, but there were also just better access and more people could actually say something despite not being able to go. And so, Justin sent me a text message not long after you, I think, and said, what if we did a kind of a team up? And I said, I thought that was immediately a great idea because we each of us have our followings on social media.
Right.
And kind of the persistent problem to getting messaging out, prior to all of this was, do you have a television? You might have a TV, but do you have Suddenlink or AT&T or whatever it is? Do you have... do you follow this page on Facebook? It's really decentralized and difficult you can't just have 4, 5, and 9 and, oh, darn, the president's talking, anymore.
Yeah.
The issue of getting in front of somebody was really tough. And so I thought this is one way to get in front of more people more effectively with the added interest of not just having 3 forums where we partnered with the League of Women Voters and then the Stillwater News Press, but 3 different topics so that when somebody tuned in, they could see the general governance ideas and kind of the introduction to campaign forum, and then move on to maybe they tune into the second one and it's about business and economic development, and then the League's one, which was a public-private partnership.
Yes.
So it could be they didn't tune into all of them, but they got what was important to them, and they had 3 opportunities to do so.
Well, and what I thought was really key with this and what really appealed to us about participating in it was because we had so darn many candidates.
Yes.
Basically,
yes.
We had 7 people who signed up, 5 who actively campaigned. And, anyone who's sat through one of the forums, usually it's we're going to ask this question and you have so long and you have so long. And it gets to the point where, if we would have had 3 completely separate forums, we would have been plowing the same ground over and over again. And each person would have had just a very short amount of time to answer because there were 5 of them. And so we wouldn't have gotten to cover very much. I think they would have been incredibly redundant, and I think they wouldn't have covered much ground, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So I think this approach was so smart.
Yes.
Because it allowed everyone to have more of a say, and it allowed us to cover so many more topics.
Yes, and I think in talking with candidates or even hearing candidates in conversation off the record, they often say something like, these forums, you only have so much time to say what's important. I call it the incumbent difficulty, right? To talk about what the work you've done as opposed to the work you would want to do.
Sure.
One is a little bit drier than the other.
Exactly.
But this gave them much more economy to their time, much more currency with what they were saying, because they didn't have to do everything at once.
Right.
They could do just this little bit, and then they knew they could talk about what they wanted to on this other subject later on.
Sure. And then we tried to kind of, tie into that with the podcast.
Yes.
By giving people yet another way.
Yes.
And another way to let someone know. Because, when and we've kind of made jokes about it when, people say, okay, tell us all about yourself. You have 90 seconds, go.
Yeah.
Right.
everything there is, everything important that you
Yes.
want the voters to know about you. And so this gave people an opportunity to, in a more relaxed atmosphere, kind of let people know who they are as people. And I think people want to know, there's always that eternal question. Are you doing what the people you represent want you to do? Or are you using your own judgment? And usually if people are honest, it's some combination of the two, depending on how much pressure is being applied
Exactly.
or
Right.
the issue. So when you have that and you know that there's an element of that, you want to know that person. You want to know that they have good values. And by values, I don't necessarily mean religious issues or whatever, but you just want to know that there's someone who's trustworthy, who's honest, who
Yes.
has good judgment. And so this kind of gave people an opportunity to show who they are as a person so that you
Right.
could get a feeling for, is this
Yeah.
someone I can trust to make decisions on my behalf and to have my best interest at heart?
Yeah.
And for some transparency here, I am also on the Chamber Government Affairs Committee. And when we had the first meeting about like, okay, what questions do we want to ask and all this stuff, I was wanting to ask kind of those type of questions. And then there was, well, it's got to kind of fit within the businessy chamber realm. And I'm like, okay, so I can't like, ask them where they grew up or something. I mean, we could,
Right.
but that just wasn't the focus. And so parallel, not being like, oh, okay, I need to go do my own thing. But Michelle and I were then Facebook comments and texting back and forth about like, we want to do a podcast. And I said, okay, there's about to be a whole lot of attention on these candidates. And I think that's the best way for us to start. For one, they're going to say yes to it because it's going to be exposure, right? Like I wanted to get to know Marshall Baker or Steve Halgren or Christy Hawkins now. And I already knew Ariel. But if I could just say like, hey, let's just sit down and have a conversation so I can get to know you. But then like same thing with Michelle, to be able to ask like just really good questions to,
At length.
Yes.
length and let them like kind of relax. And then I felt like we really got to know them. And I then immediately after recording the first couple, because we did like Ariel and Marshall, like that same, we did like 3 or 4 in one day.
We did them really fast.
Oh.
Yeah, we
Yes.
had one marathon session. that
Yeah,
was
we
really
were
long.
here late.
I ordered a pizza. We took 30 minutes, inhaled some pizza, and went back to recording.
Yeah. But at the end of it, I was like, I just made voting harder for myself.
Yes,
Right?
And it's because of you guys. You mentioned 2 things. You mentioned in I think the John Bartley episode that one of his thoughts was we don't want to get so big that we have 2 high schools.
Right.
And then that could be the critical mass point where when somebody runs for office, you have no idea who they are. And so it was a nice marriage of this podcast and these forums where you've got that kind of intimate conversation. But then if you want to get into the deep policy weeds, in a manner of speaking,
Yes.
the forums let kind of put their suits and ties on and have to really work the candidate angle in
Exactly.
that public facing way. So I
What
think
do
it was
you
a
think
great
about infrastructure?
Yes.
How are you going to fix
Yes.
the roads?
And they have to
Yeah,
do that
because
on
that's
the
all
shoot,
important.
right?
That's
They
right.
don't necessarily have like, one of them gets up and is like, okay, here's my thoughts on this project. And they go and talk for 10, 20 minutes. They don't have that. They've still got to be able to concisely put their thoughts together in the actual job. So it's good that
Right.
the forums help them practice that.
Yeah.
It was funny when we started doing this. At first, I'm sure people were just like, "You want to what? You want me to what? Who are you?" Kind of thing.
Yeah, luckily everybody knew Michelle.
that
Yeah.
helps.
Yes.
That helps a little
Yes.
bit. That there was a little bit of built-in credibility there because I think they at least thought that I wasn't going to do something crazy. It wasn't going to be horrible or completely irresponsible. And then of course you only have to get one. Because once one person commits to it and you get them, then everyone else feels the pressure because they don't want to be the only one who's not doing it.
Right.
Well, your opponent just recorded an episode with us. So, and there's that.
Very persuasive.
It is. I mean, I've been doing this a while. I know how to get people.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about for our city council candidate runoff. So we did all of our forums, we did our interviews, and it was like, we get to do them again. And then Brian was going around emailing the chamber committee, and I'm guessing also the league on like, okay, what questions do we want to ask this time?
And we also open to public questions as well to be submitted through our events page as well, just like with the previous three.
Correct.
And that
What
is
kind of
really-
response?
There were quite a few really good
Yes.
questions. I think election fatigue may have set in by the end, if you can imagine. So there were fewer submissions by the end, but there was enough to kind of craft workable thoughts into something to ask by the time we got to the council chambers.
Yes.
From the public submissions on the chamber's part, the league, of course, had plenty of questions that they submitted to not perform a nice foundation for that forum.
If we had election fatigue, people who don't have a reason to focus on the elections were definitely real. But still decent turnout, I gotta say. But,
Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
but the questions that you guys wanted to ask, one thing I noticed was that everyone was referencing this same sort of set of questions, the same sort of
Yes.
philosophy.
Yeah. So if you listen to, if you watched every single forum, well, not every single forum, if you watched this last city council forum,
the runoff.
the runoff
Yes.
forum, and then you listened to Michelle and I's critical conversation with Christy and Ariel, it would sound a little deja vu.
Yes,
I love
yeah. They it was funny to me because they approached me after the fact and said, that was a really nice forum. I really liked that, and they kind of had this sort of, I got this tongue-in-cheek attitude out of it. I wasn't sure where it was coming from. I said, I talked to Chris and Michelle too, and I like Studio Stillwater, and I listened to you guys on your episode, your individual episodes, and I'm sure they thought, he must have known about the recording and just got the questions, and I was playing like into their hand that I was playing into a game I had no idea was going on.
Yeah.
It was
So that-
absolute happenstance that there was similarities.
That first question was, what part of town do you live in and why do you live there? And it's a great question that just allows them to kind of explain themselves. And so, yes, we had actually recorded 2 days before.
Yes.
And
a
then
couple days before.
it takes a little while for me to get through the editing process. And I was kind of waiting for the weekend because that's when more people have time to listen and stuff. And then Thursday,
You go,
the candidate
wait.
forum, and once you get started and everything, and then the same question, I was like, oh boy. And then there was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 of the similar questions that we all ended up pulling from a website called Strong Towns. And I've been following Strong Towns for a couple years now. Once I really started getting into the downtown Stillwater stuff and how the economic development of our community and how all that stuff kind of plays together, really started paying attention to some of the stuff they've been putting out. And then in our chamber meeting, Stephen Ghost says, well, here, there's this like 10 questions you should ask somebody running for local office.
It was incredible.
And
yeah.
so when we decided, like, what are we going to do? I pitched that to Michelle. She's like, these are great. And so I went through and like, okay, it's like, how about like 3 or 4 of those? And then on your forum, on your submission for questions, I put some of the ones that we were not going to do. And so I don't know, but the origin to me was kind of Stephen Ghost had kind of like suggested it, and then somehow it kind of spread out. But Joanne, how did you guys? Because Bryan kind of told me that like some of these Strong Towns questions kind of popped up on your guys' radar too.
I guess they did. I'm not sure because I don't know where they came from. The questions, just because they were submitted, during
You formed
the
a
forum.
committee, right?
Yeah, we formed a committee. Yeah, we form a committee
Got it.
when we do the ones for the paper. We and for the forum and for our forum, but we form a committee like of 3 or 4 people, and we meet at a restaurant or something, and we craft these questions, and then we really put a lot of thought into it. We put a lot of thought. A lot of times it may seem as though they're redundant, but it depends on what's going on at that time. Depends on what the issues are. It depends on what the city is doing. It depends on what the community is doing. And you were saying that the community is friendly. Is see if it make it more friendly. Stillwater's very friendly. Stillwater's very, very friendly.
America's friendliest college town.
It is, yes, it is, and social. And so anyway, so that's where we get them from. We form a committee.
Got it.
And then now I will say this time when I got some off the internet when I took to the forum, but I didn't ask those because we come prepared with extra in case we don't get enough viewers. But we really got a lot of viewers, partnering with you and everything, and with you,
Right.
and you, we got a lot of viewers. And this time we didn't. We use it. We have a cell phone that we let people call in when we've had forums in person, and we didn't need to utilize it.
Oh, by the way, we talked about whether we should do that for something, and then someone said, "Well, no, you don't want to give out your phone number. You need a burner phone." And I
Yes.
thought the League of Women Voters has a burner phone.
Yes, we do.
It had never occurred to me.
We
until
do.
then.
We do. Yeah.
Very wise. That's why they've been around for 100 years.
Exactly.
Yes.
But
kind
so
of
people
thinking.
were texting in questions.
Yeah, well, no. Well, they did on the website, but they didn't we didn't utilize the phone.
You didn't use the burner phone.
We
this
didn't
time.
use it this time. Yeah, this time we did not use it. But we, because everybody was, online. Most people have a phone, cell phone, and they just watch things there or on their computer and they call it. But some people, some of the older people in town, they aren't computer savvy or cell phone savvy, and so they like that phone number to call in.
Yeah.
And they usually, have really good questions, because they've lived here a long time.
So normally they call in live and somebody just kind of writes down their question and then asks it.
Yes. Yeah, they call it, and they can text. They can text it in to the phone number. Somebody monitors the phone. Somebody does the timing. Somebody does the moderating, and we also screen questions because we don't allow any personal attacks.
Yeah.
Or if it looks, too fishy or something, or way out, and we've had some of those.
I bet.
And so we have to go through them and
Filter
and
'em.
make sure that filter them. Yes, yes. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think sometimes the younger generations forget that phones make phone calls.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that's like actually not a bad way to communicate a lot of information really
That's
quickly.
right. That's right.
It's
right.
a lot easier.
But then you can't
is.
edit before you hit send.
That's right.
If, like I said, if you watched and listened, it was really interesting because the questions, so Christy, she was really good. She pretty much was what she said on the podcast, she said on the forum. So I think she kind of has that, like, she's prepared. She's got kind of a set answer.
Well, I noticed that as we were doing the podcast, I noticed that there were a couple of candidates who very much they were pretty good at, like, they had a message and then they would go back on message. I mean, they would answer the
Yes.
question, but
Yeah.
they would tend to always want to go back to the message. And, and so those candidates, a lot of times you're going to see a lot of consistency because there are points they want to get through every time.
Yeah. And then, like, Ariel, kind of completely different in a way. She definitely wanted to kind of process each question and maybe take a little bit more time, but she would give slightly, she would kind of not change her answers per se, because they really weren't answers, but just felt like, okay, I already said this before. I think I can add to it with something. So it's just interesting to see how comfortable each personality type was in each setting.
I don't know. It was a fascinating process. The critical conversations thing that we did too, where we had the candidates sit down in the same room together and talk to us. And we tried to make it, we had, I don't know. I mean, it was an experiment. I think it went pretty well, and the candidates seemed to like it.
Yes, I think it was a success in that there were a couple candidates. They had just never met each other before.
Right.
You know, they hadn't actually had a chance to like talk to one another. So
Certainly
I know
not
that,
in the same room.
Oh,
Yeah.
This last year.
and it, you know, the original idea was to bring them together because I felt like most of all the candidates could agree on more things than they would
Right.
disagree. But give an opportunity for like talking to each other instead of like in other political forms where they're more talking at each other. But it seemed like all of them came down to really being thankful for the other person that ran against them and that they got to know them better. And so I don't know. I chalked that up for a win.
I felt good about it. It was funny because after Ariel and Christy got done with their episode, they stood outside the building and talked for like 5 or 10 more
Yes.
minutes.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
so
good.
I felt like, yes, this is working.
That's good.
This is
Yes.
good.
Yes.
You know, and Marshall and Steve did really well. You know, I was really gratified actually by the one with Camille and Carly. Because Carly is, you know, she's coming at it from a parent's perspective. She didn't have a lot of experience with school board. Definitely had not run for office before, but you know, had some real concerns and felt like the
Yes.
parent's perspective was not always represented. Camille has been on the school board for a while, and you know,
And she's
in
a professional educator.
exactly. So in a policy debate, you know, I mean, it would seem like a very uneven matchup. But when you have two people who care about the community, who care about children and their education, sitting there
Yes.
talking to each other and having a conversation, I think they left with a lot of mutual respect,
Yes.
which was really nice.
And that, I mean, that's a logical extreme almost of just getting your message to, you know, it might have been that DeYoung was the evident candidate who would win, but she wasn't going to walk away not knowing what the
Yes.
opponent.
Exactly.
felt.
Exactly.
So better than just a parade of parents at a school board meeting for 3 minutes, right?
Well, and this was a venue where she could be open. She didn't have people just pummeling with her with accusations or, you know, strongly worded statements that they
Right.
wanted to make in their very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
They could have this give and take. She could ask follow-up questions and say, well, what is hard about that?
Right.
Why is that so difficult? And Carly could explain. And there was some stuff that came out of that conversation that I had not heard before that I think, you know, Camille will take with her to the school board, and she will have a different awareness of how some people struggled with this and what some of the needs actually are.
I would love if the efforts and it really requires the efforts of us as citizens.
Right.
If Stillwater was a place that was like America's friendliest politics, maybe.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
like as an example of like you can have different views, different ideas, but at the end of the day, you're neighbors, you're in the same community, and you want to see things to improve.
Well, the idea that you can have civic engagement at a very high level, but it can also be civil.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes.
and respectful.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it can.
And I think that's really, you know, what you want to get down to. I don't know. I mean, you know, and one thing that was interesting to me, again, going back to that kind of strong towns thing that you guys were pulling from. I mean, did you pull from that because of a philosophical thing, or was it just kind of convenient because they were these pretty good questions that kind of tell you a little bit about who someone is and how they, it seemed to me that there's a lot of the questions got down to who are you and how do you live in this community?
Right.
How do you move about this community and how are you involved in it?
Right. Well, I think first things first, Vice Mayor Darlington left behind some big shoes to fill. And I think everybody wanted to know how, who is going to be the next person in that seat, and whether they were going to be, you know, another Pat Darlington or another, or somebody else entirely. So the how was very important. And then I think one of the appeals of those questions, albeit quite convenient for what they got out of, for how they were crafted, was how I think the way they were geared around what is the solution to a difficult problem, even if it's adjacent to that. You know, there's patching a road, and then there's finding a way to make the road used in a way that makes it last longer. Make it like the discussion on what to do with Sixth Street corridor,
Right.
Whether it's 3 lanes, 4 lanes, 6 lanes, or whatever it might be. That's the kind of horizontal reasoning that a smaller town has to resort to, because there's not, there's one fault with Strong Towns is that the Strong Towns website is that many of the communities they talk about can take property taxes.
Oh, yeah.
We cannot
right
now. And so, they've got that kind of reasoning they can rely on, but we have to even more dexterously manage the purse. And so it's finding kind of oblique solutions to problems really drive home the importance of that how. And with all of the recent engagement we'd seen just before the COVID-19 boom hit, there was a lot of eager energy from citizen groups to get involved to make something happen. What was it? A Stillwater version of maps, or something else.
Yeah, Envision Stillwater, Love Stillwater.
Right.
All that. Yep.
And so there was a lot of that energy. And then when we all got shut down, it was all just bottled up suddenly. We were looking for an outlet, and lo and behold, there was a seat open to run, and then this new way to view it happening through, just the regular meetings into that, and then the election itself. And we had a lot of interest in finding out the ways we could run this town in the way that makes sense. And I think the makes sense part was what was really important.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really hoping, spoiler alert, we're going to try to get a chance to sit down with Pat Darlington. And because I think her decision for one, like we talked about, in the past, we had a lot of appointments.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of actual elections and campaigns. And so I don't know. I'm just curious about her thoughts of like how intentional she was, and knew that if she puts her seat up, that is going to kind of rally all that energy and give us something to work on. Mm-hmm. Also, as we're kind of trying to work out of this pandemic.
Right. I think I heard her mention before that she had committed to a certain amount of time on the council, but I think she also sees great value in finding the next person who can be a leader, the next person who will make Stillwater the end point, not the stepping stone.
Yes.
And I think,
right.
and that's something that I think a lot of us have come to really want to gun for, especially, this was supposed to be a census year last year, and that was our way to make Stillwater like the end point, not the stepping stone.
Yes.
And so we needed that way to find it, and I think that there very well could have been some of that calculus in there.
Right. I mean, well, and Pat she has put a lot. She's very invested in the community, in building community, in building a sense of community. I think that's been a big thing with her. Obviously, there were other issues that attracted, candidates. And we had a couple of candidates who, kind of fell off earlier because for whether they would have been, I don't think it's so easy to really just write someone off as a one-issue candidate. Because the fact is, once you get on the council, you don't get to be that. It doesn't matter whether you think you are or not.
That's right.
Surprise, you get to decide all kinds of stuff, Mm-hmm. So I think there was a little bit of that, people responding to a particular issue, whether it's the mask ordinance or whether it's someone who's responding to someone who's responding to the mask ordinance or whatever. But I think that in the end, we got a couple of really good, strong candidates who were very invested in the community. And who, I think we would have been in great shape either way.
Yes.
Yes. I really do.
Yeah.
And they had these conversations about our community. And I always feel like we're in the newsroom, we would find ourselves relying on the cliche, we're on the cusp, And it's like, we're always on the cusp of something.
Like on
you
the
know.
cusp of 50,000. On the cusp
Exactly.
of,
It's
you know,
just-
something happened at Block 34.
It's just whatever.
Uh-huh.
We're just on the cusp. Or you could say we're high centered, or, you know, however you want to look at it. But I mean, I feel like, you know, Stillwater is seriously, though, at sort of this inflection point where we're not a little town anymore,
No.
but we're not really a big city either. You know, we're not as big as some towns. But this is the point where we have to decide what we want to be when we grow up, or how we're going to move forward. You know, what are we going to become? Because we're going to
Yes.
become something. And sometimes not making a choice is the same thing as making a choice, because it means you're okay, you're cool with wherever you wind up,
Yes.
you know. And I think part of the deal with our city is that we need to be intentional. And we need to have a guiding vision and
Yes.
philosophy and stick to it for a little while.
Yeah, and I think the dust is settling, and we're walking away from this with a whole host, as Mayor Joyce calls them, Stillwegians,
Yes.
who actually know how elections work and what the city council does, right?
Yes.
And that they're not just a council, but a utility authority and an economic development authority and a policy maker and all of these things all in one package. And there are many people, and myself included among them, that before serving on the committee and for others the election didn't know that. And now a lot more people are informed how, you know, our town is run by people too.
Yes.
And they've got a lot of jobs, and it's more than what we thought before.
No, absolutely. I mean, as someone who's been watching local politics for a while, Joanne, what's your take on all of this?
Well, my take on it is pretty much what you've all said. I mean, I think that Stillwater has progressed in quite a long way, you know, from everyone that has been an elected official. And I think that people want to see Stillwater grow. They want to see it grow. They want to see their children educated well. They want to feel safe. And they want a good medical facility, I think. And all that goes, and they want better streets, you know, because some of them are terrible, you know.
Everyone agrees on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's mainly what I think about it. You know, I think, you know, people are just more involved. They're getting more involved. And in light of what, you know, is happening at our Capitol in Washington, I think that fuels it. You know, that fuels the interest and the, you know, and dispels the apathy,
Right.
you know, and people want to elect, because your government starts at the local level. It starts there, and it goes up.
I
to the
only
top
wish we
level.
could have the local level tell the state level and the
Yes.
federal level what to do.
Yes,
If only.
Yes.
If only.
Yes. Yes.
Or had as
only.
much coverage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of like,
Exhausted.
oh, you want this money? Well, you got to do this.
Yeah. And have civil conversations.
Right.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And not blame the media.
Yeah, there is that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I
You're
appreciate that. Yeah, the M word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody likes to throw that one
Yeah.
around. I was talking about media, like capital M media too. It's like the big, I'm always like, I'm lowercase media. I don't know what to tell you. I don't speak for all media.
Yeah.
This is like a family dinner conversation over the holidays.
Ooh.
So this has been great, guys. I really appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the servants that you guys each provide in this process. I think we have made Stillwater a better place and a better example of local politics and local elections. I feel like we've got like a whole new chapters about to begin. New leadership at OSU.
Yes.
And the president and athletics director.
Yes, that's true. And that's going to
Yes.
drive
I mean,
a lot of decisions.
There's
Yes.
a lot of turnover happening, and I think we're making the right steps.
Yes.
I don't think we're regressing.
No.
At
we're
all.
Progressing. We're progressing.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
and it takes all of us, and it takes the voters too.
Right.
That's the next thing we still got to work on. We
Takes a
second.
need to still work on that voter turnout. So
Yeah.
Well,
It's an
And I get so this one of my pet peeves is that people that complain and say, "What's the sense in voting?" And I think it's your privilege to vote.
yeah,
And if you don't vote, then you can still, we have freedom of speech and freedom of everything, and you can still express your complaints, but put it into action.
yep,
You know,
Right.
show up for the forums or on TV or wherever, and show up for I'm bad about not going to city council meetings on Monday night. I totally forget about it.
But you can watch
But
them
when you
later.
watch it, you can
Yeah.
watch it. I mean, getting involved, and the vote counts so much. And I'm not saying that because I'm in the League of Women Voters, but
yeah,
because it does count.
yep. It's the role we're supposed to be playing.
Yes, and it's our privilege, and so many countries don't have that.
Right. There are people who die,
Yes.
for the privilege of voting.
Yes,
Yeah.
And who did in this country
yes.
for us to be able to do all this.
Exactly.
That's right.
But I think that this, I think it does take everybody to be involved and to create that sense of engagement and everything. And I hope we can all stay involved in this process as we move forward to
Yes,
future elections. I think it was a successful experiment with everybody kind of
Yes.
working together.
I
Yeah.
look forward to working with Bryan again.
As
He
do
wants
I.
to.
That's going to be, I think, the gold standard of
Yes.
governing, or not governing, but electioneering, I suppose, would be
Yes,
the word
yes.
in the future. Because that's the goal in the first place, is to work together to make something happen. And when
Yes.
we're doing that, we see the involvement we need, and we're harvesting that energy, that extraordinary amount of energy it takes to make society, cities, states, the nation work. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think we just need to continue it. So thank
Yes.
you guys for being here. We
Oh,
really
well, you're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
I'm so happy that you invited me.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah.
it's
I
been a
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Let's do it
It's been
again
a
next
pleasure.
time.
Yes, let's do.
Our mission at Studio Stillwater is to elevate local voices to tell local stories. You can get in touch with us via email, studiostillwaterok@gmail.com, or slide into our DMs on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can also send us a voice message by going to anchor.fm/Studio Stillwater. Just hit the add message button to record right from your phone or computer. We would love to feature your voice in a future episode. Finally, check out the show notes. There you will find links to everything we discussed on the show. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.